Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom, and I'm your weekly horoscope columnist here on Astrology Hub. And this time I wanted to share with you my outstanding planetary aspects for 2026. On January 20th, Saturn will form a sextile to Uranus. Now, this is interesting because this is the last sextile that Saturn and Pisces will be forming to Uranus in the zodiac sign of Taurus. Now, typically, Saturn and Uranus are antagonistic planets in astrology. And the reason for that dates back to their time in Greek mythology. There was a time in Greek mythology where Uranus was the ruler of the universe. But in order for life to grow, which Uranus was sort of stifling, Saturn had to overthrow him. And Saturn did. Saturn overthrew his father Uranus by castrating him and sending him falling down from the heights of heaven. And so, as you can imagine, there's a bit of an uneasy relationship between the two of them. Not a little bit of enmity is lost in their rapport and relationship. So typically, Saturn and Uranus are very much antagonistic, as I said. But what happens with a sextile is that they put aside their differences and they work together, although they may still be coming from two very different points of view. Now, Saturn is a planet that we often associate with the past, while Uranus is a planet that we often associate with the future. Saturn believes that the best things in life already happened, usually centuries ago, and that the future is all downhill from there. Well, Uranus believes that the best is yet to come, once we can free ourselves of the shackles of the past. Saturn believes in reinstating what was lost, while Uranus believes in inventing something new. As I said before, the two planets put aside their differences when they form a sextile. And this is sort of the relationship that they set up with one another. Saturn, as I said, is a planet that very much focuses on the past, on the way things have always been done, and we should never change that. Why fix something that hasn't been broken? While Uranus believes in constant innovation and invention. Now, Uranus has a tendency to be very utopian in its view of life and the world. And by utopian, I mean that Uranus strives to create a perfect society that lies somewhere in the future, a place where all of our aspirations will be realized and everyone will get along with everyone else. Saturn reminds Uranus that utopias tend to focus on aspirations while ignoring their consequences. While Uranus shows Saturn, who's very focused on the past, that there isn't a past that doesn't dream of a better future, that doesn't dream of the future as being a better place, and that without that dream of a better future, Adam and Eve, for instance, would have just thrown in the fig leaf when they were exiled from Eden. The future, according to Uranus, is the only thing that can redeem everything that has come before. But Uranus can't build that future without Saturn's help. On January 26th, Neptune re-enters the zodiac sign of Aries, where it will remain until March 2039. Now, as I've said before, Neptune tends to glamorize whatever zodiac sign it's moving through. And we've certainly seen a lot of glamorization of this Mars-ruled sign since March of last year. Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars is named after the god of war, and Mars is also the planet of men. So the ideas of war and anger and brute force, the idea of toughness and never giving in, are all virtues, values of Aries that are going to become glamorized and even exaggerated during the period of time that Neptune is passing through the zodiac sign of Aries. So, in other words, people are going to feel very much like anger is something that shows that I'm passionate about something, that it's better to be wrong and strong than it is to be right and weak. It might be another idea. So this idea of toughness and going after what you want and getting your way and shouting down people that are weaker than you, these are things that can become, as I said, glamorized or even exaggerated during the period of time that Neptune is passing through this fire sign. But Neptune is the planet of illusion and disillusionment. And the best way to think of that idea of illusion and disillusionment is to go back to the idea of Neptune. Neptune was named after the Greek god of the oceans, Poseidon. His Roman name was Neptune. And what I want you to think of for just a moment here is a wave breaking on the shore. You know, the wave breaks on the shore and it spreads out in all directions. And that's kind of the illusion of Neptune. Neptune is a planet that deals very much with the atmosphere that we live in. One might sort of call it a climate that we live in, a way of being. One might also refer to it as a bubble, something that we believe is true as long as we live within our bubble. So Neptune rules over things like trends, the things that people find fashionable or that are suddenly pulling interest or focus. When we talk about trend or fashion, that tends to sound a little lightweight, but the idea is that Neptune really colors what's prevalent or what resonates now in society. The Germans had a word for it, which was Zeitgeist, which meant spirit of the times, and that's what Neptune rules over. So when we're talking about what we find fashionable or trendy or something that everyone's talking about, it's illusory. It's not a thing that you can point to or own, but it's illusory. It might be an idea, a way of being, a lifestyle, a belief, even. So when you think of the wave crashing on the shore and spreading out in all directions, that's kind of the diffuse energy of Neptune. Neptune takes an idea, it doesn't hit you over the head with it. It takes an idea and it gently introduces it over a long period of time and it diffuses it throughout society. All of a sudden, people are like, yeah, it's good to be tough. I'm tired of being compassionate and understanding, Neptune and Pisces. Now it's time to be tough and rough and individualistic and scoff at rules that, are holding me down and I don't have to follow them if I don't want to. These become very powerful ideas. So, like a wave which breaks on the shore and spreads in all directions, that's kind of Neptune diffusing its energy, is kind of the illusory quality of Neptune. But then what that wave does is that it recedes back into itself. Okay, it breaks on the shore and it recedes back into itself where it curls up into another wave. That receding back into self is the disillusionment. Okay, it can be this feeling of like, yeah, I'm a rugged individual. I'm acting out my Neptune and Aries, but at the same time, I don't feel like I'm very strongly convinced that this is who I am or what I want, or maybe the only way that I feel like I can get what I want is by acting like I don't care or indifferent or something like that. So there's a sort of compensatory aspect to the behavior of Neptune, one that fears that if it doesn't keep up the front, or if it doesn't keep up the belief, if it doesn't power through with what it thinks, for instance, is maybe masculine or a dominant type of energy. And when I say masculine, women can be just as masculine as men. It's not gender specific. So when it recedes, there's this disillusionment. There can be a feeling of like, well, maybe I'm not really that, or maybe I'm sort of confused or meandering. And then when the wave breaks on the shore again, it can be this feeling of like, put that out of your head, be focused, stay focused. Don't yield the field, don't recede at all. So embracing values of fighting and combat and outshouting, these are going to be things that really are going to become more and more prevalent in our society with Neptune's 13-year-long stay in the zodiac sign of Aries. But Neptune still asks a question. And the question is very powerful. It's a very pertinent question. And the question that Neptune is asking in the zodiac sign of Aries is, what is real power? Is real power about putting down people, or is real power about lifting them up? And this is something that will be an underlying theme in your life for not only 2026, but for the following 12 years. On February 3rd, Uranus comes out of retrograde. Uranus, as we all know, is the planet of revolution and change. Whenever it's moving through an astrological chart, it takes all the things that you believed in and held fast to, and it knocks everything upside down and inside out. That's Uranus's job. It's to bring in the changes, it's to bring in the revolution, it's to upset firmly held beliefs. All right. Now, when a modern planet turns retrograde or direct, and today we're talking about Uranus coming out of retrograde, what I need to remind you of is that all the modern planets, and that's any planet discovered after 1781, Uranus was discovered in 1781, for instance, followed by Neptune in 1846 and Pluto in 1930, the modern planets, because they're so far away from the sun, really spend about half the year retrograde. Okay, so they move direct, they move backwards. They move direct a couple of degrees, they move backwards 1 or 2 degrees. They move direct maybe 4 or 5 degrees, backwards 1 or 2 degrees. So this is why it takes the modern planets so long to get through an astrological sign. They're constantly going in and out of retrograde. Now, our understanding of a retrograde is that this is the period of time when it looks like the planet is moving backwards in the sky. Obviously, a planet isn't really moving backwards in the sky because if it were, we'd all be in a lot of trouble. But it looks like the planet is moving backwards in the sky. The planet is spending a long time in just one zodiac sign. And so we often say when a planet is retrograde that it acts contrary to its nature. So if Uranus, for instance, is the planet of revolution and change, maybe perhaps Uranus retrograde is a period of time where when you're not experiencing revolution and change. Now, Uranus retrograde doesn't exactly put life on hold, but it does slow developments down significantly. And since Uranus reversed direction in September of 2025, you might have found that during this period of time between September and February 2026, that you've been enjoying a bit of a holiday. No bolts out of the blue, no curveballs out of left field, or unexpected reversals or rude awakenings. Now, this isn't to say that you've been absolutely immune to the effects and the influence of Uranus. Uranus is still, as I said before, the planet of revolution and change. However, its backwards motion, because it's so slow, may have allowed for a sort of heads up beforehand, in that many of the things that would have typically taken you by surprise, you would have had forewarning about, and you might have been prepared for them to show up in your life. You maybe during this period of time that Uranus was retrograde from September 2025 to February 2026, you could see the about face coming from miles away. You had a feeling that someone was on the fence or maybe not so reliable, and you would have had plenty of time to prepare for it. Now, needless to say, all of this changes when Uranus comes out of retrograde. This is when life goes back into fast motion, when you feel like things are fast forwarding again, where issues that were on the back burner are once again front and center again, which is good news for those of you who have been waiting on stalled plans, and not such good news for those of you who might have grown complacent or adopted the ostrich policy about certain unappealing situations. On February 13th, Saturn re-enters the zodiac sign of Aries, where it will reside until April 12th, 2028. Now, Saturn first entered the zodiac sign of Aries last year in 2025. You could sort of think of it as sort of dipping its toe in the pool to see what the temperature was like. And then it took its toe out of the pool and retreated back down into the zodiac sign of Pisces. Now it is re-entering. It's come out of retrograde and it's direct, and it's now re-entering the zodiac sign of Aries with renewed vigor, vim, and purpose. Now, Saturn does two things at once when it is traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries. On one hand, Saturn in Aries demands that you obey authority. But what's also ironic is that Saturn in Aries also makes you question the authority that you are following. So there are two impulses that are going on here. Saturn in Aries is saying obey authority, salute the flag or the person who's in charge. But it's also saying to you, but make sure that the person who's in charge is worthy of being in that position. Like, does this person deserve to be in a position of power over me? Now, if they do, then everything's simpatico. You're good. You'll fall into line and you'll march forward and you'll do what you're told. And indeed, nothing will make you feel more secure than to follow someone who knows what they're doing, who shows resolve, and isn't afraid to do what's right, even if other people think it's wrong. But, and this is a big but what if this person isn't the leader that they pretend to be? What if they're really a secret bully? What if they blame other people for the mistakes that they have made or fail to deliver on their promises? Then, because of the Saturn and Aries energy, you will work to overthrow that person because they shouldn't be where they are. They aren't worthy of the authority that has been assigned to them. All of this goes to say that Saturn in Aries takes authority very, very seriously. But at the same time, Saturn in Aries is reluctant to step into a position of authority where it has authority over others. So it's really an odd dilemma here. It takes authority very seriously and it will judge whether someone is deserving of that authority. But let's say the person isn't, the Saturn in Aries is also very reluctant to step into that position of authority. It wants someone else to take over that authority instead of themselves. They don't feel like they themselves are worthy. So these twin ideas of obeying and wanting to obey and follow and but also questioning the authority and a reluctance towards taking over authority, all of these ideas are going to be a part of your life and are going to be something that you're struggling with over the next 2 years.
The Astrology Hub Black Friday sale is on. From now through December 2nd, you can save 40% off courses in the Astrology Hub Academy, including classes from astrology legends like Judith Hill, Rick Levine, Gemini Brett, Cameron Allen, and so many more. When you purchase a course from us, you get lifetime access, allowing you to dive in whenever you're ready. Don't miss this chance to expand your astrological toolkit at an incredible value. Head to www.astrologyhub.com/Black Friday to shop this limited time sale. Now, let's dive back into today's episode.
On February 17th, there will be a solar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Aquarius. Now, this solar eclipse taking place on February 17th is the first of a 2-year cycle of eclipses that lasts through February 2028. Now, this eclipse in Aquarius is really quite fascinating. Eclipses, as you may already know, are the period of time where the light goes out in heaven. For instance, with the solar eclipse, where the moon moves in front of the sun and blocks its rays, it's the light disappearing in the middle of the day. The moon has moved in front of the sun, and it has suddenly brought night to the middle of the day. This is something that's a pretty rare occurrence. It's called an absolute eclipse. Or a visible eclipse, but nevertheless, it's something that we here in North America have experienced a couple of times in the last few years. So this idea of light out in heaven, the sun disappearing from the daytime sky rather, this is something that's connected to an eclipse. And so an eclipse can literally mean the disappearance of an energy, okay, or a disappearance of something that is connected to the zodiac sign that the eclipse is taking place in. For instance, if we remember that, okay, Aquarius is associated with modern technology, there might be something that's going on with modern technology during this solar eclipse that's taking place on February 17th, which is completely unexpected and taking everyone by surprise. Maybe all of a sudden it accelerates and comes into our lives and transforms us instantly. Or, which can also happen during a solar eclipse, maybe it goes off the tracks. Maybe it ends up in the ditch or ends up having some kind of reversal or surprise upset or rude awakening. Any of those things can happen, either of those things can happen, rather, during the time of a solar eclipse. There's always a feeling of a radical redirection. It can be a sense of, I'm going in this direction and now I need to go over here. Or it can be like everything was set up and ready to go, and all of a sudden we've been thrown off balance or thrown for a spin on the wheel of fate. Something that one would pretty much kind of expect, given that Uranus is one of the planets that rule the zodiac sign of Aquarius, and Aquarius has a tendency to be very unpredictable. But what is this going to mean to those of us living a regular life, that we're not connected to huge tech companies and making these decisions about who's going to run the world and all these sorts of things? So, what's this solar eclipse in Aquarius going to mean to us? Aquarius to me is it's an endlessly fascinating sign. Okay, it's one that has really seized my imagination over the years. It's not the easiest sign to define because there's so much going on with it. What I can tell you is that Aquarius is one of three zodiac signs that are associated to the element of air. Those signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And these are the three zodiac signs that are very much connected to relationships, to the way that people get along with one another. And you can even see the development of relationship or maturing from one relationship level to another in the story of the three air signs themselves. For instance, Gemini, the zodiac sign of the twins, obviously rules over sibling relationships. So that's a brother or a sister that you have in childhood, or if you didn't have a sibling, maybe it was the kid next door or a playmate, someone who also played that role of a peer, someone your age that you could play with or hang out with. Okay, so Gemini rules over sibling relationships, which are our first relationships. That's where we learn to get along with someone else, or to tattletale on someone, or fight over the remote control, or we get compared as being the smarter, the prettier one. All these sorts of things of acceptance and competition and non-acceptance and rejection, all of these things are experienced in childhood and usually through a sibling. There are curious alliances because even if you like hate your sibling or whatever, you end up sort of allying with your sibling, certainly on a point or three. So early relationships are sibling relationships, and the big idea or the word with Gemini is the word play. This is where we learn how to play and get along. Okay, play nicely with others, share, those sorts of things. Libra is about a relationship with someone outside your family. Okay, Libra traditionally rules over marriage, and it also rules over any sort of partnership, whether that's a business partnership that you enter into with someone else and you sign a contract, or it's a creative collaboration that you enter into with someone else and you sign a contract. Indeed, signing a contract is very Libran, where things are sort of understood with Gemini. With Libra, things are more formalized. You sign a contract, you protect the interests of the two separate parties who are joining together. And those people might be like, well, we get along. Why should we have to sign a contract? Well, for those of us who've gone through situations in which suddenly we're not so enamored with a partner or a superior or a client, you know that relying on that contract helps you during that period of time. All right. So this is Libra. It's a partnership, but a partnership that's also defined legally or through a contractual basis. Finally, we get to Aquarius. And Aquarius is the person in the group. Okay. Um, this is pretty much like your culture, the way that you're raised, your people, your ethnicity, your background, your society. It can be your nation, it can be your neighborhood. Okay, so Aquarius is the person within the group, and it is political by nature. And what I mean by political by nature isn't that it's getting into endless arguments about Democrats and Republicans and things like that. Political comes from the word polis, okay, and polis meant city, particularly city state in Greece. And so it's the idea of a governed city-state that is ruled, a society that is ruled. And what kind of society do you want? Do you want a tyrannical society, a democratic society, a society where there are no rules, a society that's autocratic? What sort of society do you want to live in? And these are the great questions of Aquarius. They're always thinking about social movements or what does well by everyone. Now, I'm not saying that everyone born under Aquarius is going to, have read Karl Marx or Hannah Arendt or any of the other people who talk about societies and utopias and things like this. What it means, quite simply, is that people born under the zodiac sign of Aquarius naturally feel that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Okay, that that it's important that everyone be heard, that all voices be acknowledged, that everyone feel like they have a place at the table. And so there's this feeling of being part of a group and wanting to express your own voice in that group, but also listen to the other perspectives or points of view of other people as well. Now, this idea is often portrayed in some astrological texts as everyone getting together in a group, and they're going to get along. And for any of us who've been in a group for a long or even a short period of time, not everyone gets along in the group. There are the people at the front of the group, people in the back of the group, people on top, people on the bottom. And sometimes groups are hierarchical, and sometimes groups are restless. And what I find fascinating about Aquarius is that for a zodiac sign, which really believes in listening to all the different voices and all the different perspectives, which really will stand by what is important to the group, whether it's a conservative group or a progressive group, that you sacrifice to make sure that everyone in the group, the welfare of the group prevails. For a sign that really embraces that idea, that feeling of always being an outsider always follows the Aquarian around. All right. A joke that I often have with my Aquarius clients is, you've got friends and you enjoy your friends and you've got books and you love books and you could start a book club and with all of your best friends and maybe the first 5 books that are getting read are your favorite books in the whole wide world. So here you are reading your favorite books in the whole wide world with your favorite people. And probably within about 3 weeks, you will feel like you no longer belong to this group, that you're somehow an outsider, that you don't really connect or belong there anymore. So Aquarians always feel like they belong and like they don't. There's always this sense of being out of step. And this feeling of being out of step is something that's going to become very strong during the solar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Aquarius. A solar eclipse, because it darkens the light, can bring out qualities of the sign that aren't easily recognized or understood, but are there under the surface or they're woven into the fabric of the sign itself. So during this period of time of the solar eclipse, you might suddenly find yourself out of step with the people around you. That might be people that you work with every day, or it might be customers that you see every day, or neighbors, or even your PTA board, or your political party, or your church group or community group. All of a sudden, you may feel very much out of step, like you don't belong, or like they don't get you anymore, or like maybe even both are going on at the same time. Now, for some people, and it depends on your sign, for some people, the solar eclipse in Aquarius could be very liberating. It could be like, finally, I'm stepping away from the crowd and I'm going to follow the beat of my own drummer and I'm free and liberated to think and be who I want to be. So some people are going to find this eclipse very liberating, while others are going to find it very isolating, very lonely, very, I'm out of step with people that I've always cared for and I can't explain it. And I don't know what that's like, and I don't really like that feeling. So whether you're feeling liberated or suddenly isolated, all depends on what zodiac sign you were born under. But where this is going to lead is to you feeling a sense of yourself. You may feel apart or liberated, but it still comes back to who you are as a person, which gets back to Leo, which is the zodiac sign that is opposite Aquarius. So you're going to be asking yourself, okay, I'm out of step and I don't really feel like I share the same views as everyone else, but where am I going with this? And that answer to that question, where am I going with this, is going to be something that's very prevalent for you for the following year. On February 22nd, Venus will form a trine to Jupiter. I love it when the benefics form a trine to one another. A benefic is basically a planet that brings good things, and that was based on its quality of light. For instance, Venus and Jupiter in the nighttime sky were very visible, they were very recognizable, very seen, and also very pure. They radiated this pure white light. And this was always seen as benevolent and good since the ancient origins of astrology. The malefics, which were planets that brought bad things, were planets that weren't as pure or vibrant or strong in their light. Mars, for instance, has a tendency to be a kind of like muddy red. It doesn't gleam like Venus does. It kind of like sulks there, and it's muddy little red. And so Mars was sort of seen as temperamental and bringing war and conflict and things like that because maybe it envied the good things that other people had. And then Saturn was such a slow moving planet and so small and so dim and so feeble. People were always like looking around for Saturn. Where is it now? Oh, it's still over there. Okay, so Saturn, because of its dim light and its slowness, was seen as a malefic because it was seen as old or elderly. It's someone in the last stages of their life. They're about to collapse. They're slow moving. They're aches and pains and things like that. So so Mars was named after the god of war, coveting someone else's land or people or something like that, and or agricultural crops, and I'm going to wage war and take over their land and their people, and Saturn was sort of seen as the old age, the feebleness of old age. We all end up, I don't know, Shakespeare losing our teeth and wills and just ending up old. It's the early depictions of these planets were so miserable. But anyway, thankfully things have changed since. But Venus and Jupiter still carry their benevolence, okay, and their benefics. So whenever you have a trine between two planets, that means that they are in two different zodiac signs, but they share one same element. And in this case, it's the element of water. Venus is in the zodiac sign of Pisces, and Jupiter is in the zodiac sign of Cancer. What's also really nice about this trine is that both planets are exalted, meaning most celebrated. Venus is most celebrated in the zodiac sign of Pisces, and Jupiter is most celebrated in the zodiac sign of Cancer. So what's happening when Venus trines Jupiter? Well, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of trine is it? Is it an approaching trine or a departing trine? It's an approaching trine. Why? Two reasons. One, Venus moves a lot faster than Jupiter does, all right? And two, Venus is in a zodiac sign that precedes the zodiac sign that Jupiter is in. In other words, Venus is in Pisces. She's then going to go from Pisces to Aries to Taurus to Gemini and then Cancer. All right. And she's going to do that. And Jupiter is still going to be in Cancer. All right. So Venus is in the zodiac sign that precedes. It's approaching Jupiter in Cancer, which is a slower moving planet. So you can almost think of this as someone approaching, someone entering into the hall and think of Cinderella. She's been transformed from rags into a beautiful princess, and she appears, at the top of the steps of the ball, and everyone turns around. Who is that? And the prince is like, "Oh my God, I'm in love." Okay, so there's the approach. She hasn't introduced herself yet. The prince doesn't know who she is. He's merely looked up the steps, and there she is, gleaming in her Cinderella majesty, and the prince is just gum-smacked. He's like, "I have got to get to know you." This is an approaching trine. So the idea of getting together with someone, the idea of reuniting with someone from the past, getting together again, the idea of merging or acquiring, these are all ideas that would be connected to a Venus trine Jupiter. Both planets are connected to bringing good things through other people. Okay, in other words, other people gift things to you, or the union that you're going to have is not only going to benefit you, but it's going to benefit the people around you. So this idea of exalted, you can sort of think of the Venus as Cinderella at that first glance. The moment I saw you, I fell in love with you. This is a Venus-Jupiter trine, and it's about getting together romantically or financially, or even in terms of, seeing eye to eye on matters that maybe you hadn't thought you were going to see eye to eye on before. So the idea of getting together, reuniting, merging, or acquiring, these are the themes of this particular Venus-Jupiter trine. On March 3rd, we will have a lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Virgo. A lunar eclipse is not the same thing as a solar eclipse. With a solar eclipse, the moon moves in front of the sun and blocks its ray and light. Basically, what it's doing is creating a new moon. This is actually something that happens every month with a new moon. It's the only time of month when we don't see the moon in the sky because it's in front of the sun at night and is not visible. Lunar eclipse is a full moon. All right, so we see the moon full in the nighttime sky. But what's happening, because with the full moon, the moon reflects the sun's light. So with a full moon, they're opposite one another in the sky. And so the moon is reflecting the full light of the sky. She's at her most luminous as a full moon. What happens during a lunar eclipse is that the Earth moves between the sun and the moon, and it casts its shadow on the moon so that the moon begins to disappear. The moon becomes the lights out in heaven at night. Now, the moon doesn't disappear from view during a full moon, but what happens is that she starts to become very red, and very red, orangish red, or maybe even a kind of brownish red. She loses her luminosity and she becomes like a blood moon, is often how it's referred to. And during this period of time of a lunar eclipse, if a solar eclipse might be getting knocked off your perch, or being told to move in a radically new direction, what happens during the full moon, during the lunar eclipse, is that a bottom drops out from underneath a situation. A situation that you thought was stable or held together, or a situation you were hoping was stable and held together, suddenly the bottom drops out from under it and it's not sustainable anymore. So, a lot of times, what you want to do with a lunar eclipse is look back over your shoulder at the last 6 months. This would be, since it's taking place in March, think back to September. Was there a situation that you were trying to get up off the ground that wasn't really strong or vibrant? It wasn't showing the vitality that you wanted it to be showing. Maybe you weren't making a lot of money at it, or maybe you were interested in someone, but they weren't really returning your texts or your phone call, but you were hoping that, things would work out. It's usually a situation that you were hoping was gonna take off eventually, and it reaches a time during a lunar eclipse in which you realize it's not going to, or simply, the tires fall off the old car, and it kind of collapses there in the middle of the road. So there's a bit of a having to accept hard truths during a time of a lunar eclipse. But the point of a lunar eclipse isn't to be a downer. It's not to be like, here's your hard truth, have fun with it. No, that's not what a lunar eclipse is doing. What a lunar eclipse is doing is saying you need to let go of this thing that you think is going to work because it's not, right? And you standing by it or holding it or insisting that it's really what you want or that it can really succeed, this isn't helping you. It's not going to do that. And so you need to let go of it. But the lunar eclipse isn't just like you need to let go of it. The lunar eclipse is also like, I'm taking this out of your life because I'm getting rid of the old wood. I'm getting rid of the dead wood. I'm getting rid of all the things that are blocking growth. Jupiter is a planet of growth in terms of that it makes something more vigorous and more healthy. The moon is a planet of growth in terms of seeds sprouting. and beginning to leaf and to grow. Okay. So, in order for the seeds to sprout and grow, they're not going to be able to do that if they're under the layers of all this dead wood that's being carried around, or psychological baggage that's being carried around. So this is what's getting cleared out during this lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Virgo. You're getting rid of the old wood. You're getting rid of the psychological baggage. Now, what is that a little bit more specifically? Because we're dealing with astrology signs here. So what information are we getting from the sign that makes it more sign specific rather than generic? Well, we're dealing with the zodiac sign of Virgo. And Virgo is the zodiac sign of work, health, and service. So these may be issues that are very pertinent right now. For instance, you may be working at a job where it just doesn't do it for you anymore. Yes, it's maybe paying your bills, but not in the way that you need it to or that it used to. And you just might be feeling like this is a dead end job. And then there might be a part of you which is like, no, 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 it's not a dead end job. I have friends at this job, or I need this job because I've figured out my billing cycle and it works with my billing cycle and when I get paid. And, you know, the things that we tell ourselves to stay put. Okay, here, there are things that you may be telling yourself to stay put in a job that you may find thankless, and it's just not doing it for you anymore. So, what may be going on here is you might get let go or fired, or there might be a downsizing that's going on, or you yourself might just be like, you know what? I just can't keep doing this anymore. I have to do something else. So a lunar eclipse can sort of be when you finally realize you're sick and tired of being sick and tired about a situation, and that even though your feelings of security are all wrapped up in this, it's become so intolerable that you can move on. The other thing, or need to move on, or ready to move on, the other thing that can be going on here is that the lunar eclipse involves the moon, which rules the body. And we're talking about the zodiac sign of Virgo, which is a zodiac sign that's very much connected to the body. So you may be experiencing certain physical ailments or issues that you might have been explaining away, or it's not a big thing, or something along those lines. And now it's become evident that, there is an ache, there is a pain, there is an issue, there is a struggle that you're having, and that you need help. So this would be a wonderful time to go and seek the advice of a medical professional, or someone who is knowledgeable in the issues that you're facing. Sometimes I've seen someone suffer from a health matter that's easily resolvable, but actually shows or exposes another health matter that was going on. In other words, if they hadn't had this medical issue, they wouldn't have been able to recognize or uncover a greater medical issue that was going on. And more often than not, these exposures or discoveries take place at a time where you can nip it in the bud. That is like, oh, thank goodness, I had this issue that revealed another issue, because if I hadn't had it, I just would never have known, and that could have resulted in something more difficult or something more arduous. So these are other things that are going on. The body talks to you during a lunar eclipse in Virgo. It registers to you that something's wrong, something's off, and that you need to pay attention to it. And the final idea with a lunar eclipse in Virgo is the idea of service. Um, you may be in a service profession, or you may be performing a service. Maybe you're a caregiver to someone, and you're feeling very exploited and very used, and you don't like this, but you also might feel very guilty about feeling like that, like this person needs me, and but I feel exploited or used in some way. So this is going to push you to assert yourself. That might be to draw boundaries, that might be to reiterate what the codes are, what the rules are. It might simply be a talk with the person saying, just because I'm taking care of you doesn't mean that you can treat me like a doormat, you know. And I need your attitude to change, or I might not be here much longer. Okay. So those issues may also be very much pressing issues during this time. And again, because it's a lunar eclipse, it's going to be very emotional. You may feel very guilty or bad for bringing this up. But at the same time, even if you bring it up awkwardly or clumsily, it's something that needed to be brought up. What happens here is that the body is coming forward and the body is resisting something. You may have a rash or a physical issue, or you just may not like the way that you're being treated. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, so it's a very mind-oriented sign. So you can talk yourself in and out of a lot of things. And so maybe your mind is trying to tell you it's not a big deal or coming up with excuses for why someone behaves that way. But this is your body and your day-to-day self saying, you know what, this is happening. I am feeling exploited or used, or I am feeling under the weather, or I am feeling like this job is thankless. And I'm tired of talking myself out of that. I'm ready to deal with the reality of that and what the consequences are. And this is something which would be very pertinent during this lunar eclipse. And this is something that would also, as I said before, get rid of the dead wood and really create a new area in your life that's ripe for growth and fresh beginnings and starts. On March 10th of 2026, Jupiter, the planet of belief, comes out of retrograde in the zodiac sign of Cancer, the sign of Jupiter's exaltation. And this is when you will discover if your faith was well placed. Now, Jupiter in the zodiac sign of Cancer is all about being the hearth and home that other people seek. Cancer is the zodiac sign of hearth and home and family. And Jupiter is a planet that's very much associated to hospitality and to providing shelter or a sanctuary for people. So Jupiter in Cancer is all about being the hearth and home that other people seek. So in other words, you provide the roof over their head and the bed to call their own. You cradle and comfort when people feel hurt or afraid. And you make people feel like they're loved when they feel unloved. These are attributes that will be apparent in your life and in your own behavior with Jupiter in the zodiac sign of Cancer. But for the past 4 months that Jupiter has been retrograde, and Jupiter turned retrograde on November 11th, 2025, for those 4 months, you might not have felt very reassuring. You might not have felt very confident. You might have felt like a parent who's unable to help their child in their time of need. You might have lost faith in yourself and your abilities. You might have asked yourself, what kind of person am I when I can't provide? What kind of person am I when I can't take away somebody else's pain? Yet, you stayed. And that's what Jupiter retrograde is all about. It keeps on believing when there's nothing to support that belief, because it knows that at the end of the day, it's not about having the answers or making bad things go away. At the end of the day, it's all about holding someone's hand in the dark and waiting with them for the light to reemerge again, which it will now that Jupiter has resumed direction in the sky. On April 25th, Uranus re-enters the zodiac sign of Gemini, where it will remain until August 2032. Now, when Uranus first entered Gemini on July 7th, 2025, it knocked over the game board and sent all the pieces flying in your life. But after it made that kind of an abrupt entrance, it then retrograded back down into the zodiac sign of Taurus on November 7th, 2025, which gave it some time to cool its heels. Now, Uranus is kind of like a genie that's been let out of the bottle. At first, it's exhilarating to see what the genie can do. But once you register the fact that wishes come with consequences, you may have reconsidered some of the things that you set in motion in your own life. Now, nobody's saying that you have to unwish what you have wished. That's impossible. But there is such a thing as being wiser as a result of the experiences and making better choices in your life. So during this time, make a point of serving the interests of both you and the people around you. And you will find yourself driving the chariot in your life rather than being run over by it. On May 6th, Pluto will turn retrograde in the zodiac sign of Aquarius. This is going to make you feel like you can't help being swept back into a situation you thought you had put behind you. Remember that Pluto was named after the Roman god of the underworld. So what we're talking about here would be that area of your life that feels most like an enormous black hole. So what do you do? Well, you accept what you cannot change, because with Pluto, the more you struggle, the deeper you sink. However, if you were to let things play out the way that they're going to play out anyway, then you will emerge on the other side of Pluto's retrograde, revitalized and empowered in October 2026. Why? Well, the reason is because Pluto always rewards those who brave its trials. On May 22nd, 2026, the Sun will conjoin Uranus in Gemini. What's interesting about this is that this is the first time that the Sun has conjoined Uranus in the zodiac sign of Gemini. They've kind of been dancing around one another for about a year here. So this will be the first time that the Sun and Uranus will be at the same place at the same time in the zodiac sign of Gemini. You might find this experience shocking, or you might find it illuminating, or maybe you might find it to be both. What happens when you have a Sun-Uranus conjunction like this is what we call an epiphany. You might be familiar with the word epiphany. Epiphany is basically a sudden insight. It's like when the clouds above you in the sky part, and the rays of heaven come through, and you can see God in majesty or truth in its purity, or what your life is really sort of supposed to be about. You see it. It all makes sense in that instance. You're like, oh, I can't believe I'm looking at this. Of course, this is the answer I've been looking for. And at that moment, the clouds roll back in again and cover that light, and you're left wondering, what the hell was I looking at? And it felt so resonant a moment ago, but now it's cloudy and dark again, and I don't really remember what I was looking at here. Which is why it's good that we have mobile devices, so that when we have these epiphanies, we can click the button for the voice memo, and we can say very quickly what it is that we're looking at and let it go, and we can remember it for later. So epiphanies, these sudden revelations, are very important and have a very long tradition in astrology and in the history of our world. For instance, St. Paul, who was originally named Saul, was on the road to Damascus, off to persecute some Christians, when suddenly the clouds parted and he heard this voice from heaven saying, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And he fell off his horse, in a stupor, and he was blinded. And it's not until days later that a Christian, baptizes him, and Saul can see again, and he's born again, and he changes his name from Saul to Paul and becomes one of the most important people in the history of Christianity. These are the results of epiphanies. These are the results of revelations. It's something in which the truth comes through. It's Uranus, okay? It's this bolt out of the blue comes through, and it opens up your eyes, and it changes your life. Okay, now, I'm not saying that you're going to find yourself on the road going somewhere, and you suddenly have this realization, and you're going to walk out on everything in your life, or change everything that you believe to embark on a different course of action. But you are going to have a sudden realization that your life could be better, or should be doing something different, or you need to be following a different call. It could almost be kind of like a calling card from your higher purpose in a way, but it's not Jupiterian, it's Uranian. If it were Jupiterian, it would be like, hey, here's your calling card from a higher purpose, and let me walk you through, this sense of meaning and purpose that's now filling your soul. It's Uranian. You see what it could be, and then you don't, and you deal with that frustration. And you might say, frustration, well, what's the point of that? I mean, if I can just see it, why can't I just follow it? The frustration is part of the process. You deal with that blindness. I saw it for a moment, and now I'm blind and I can't see it. And now I have to pursue that invisible feeling of something that's tugging at me in my life. And it's going to be something that's associated to an ideal. It's going to be something that's associated to a radical change in your life. As you can already see, this is kind of a theme for 2026. We already had a sense of this with the solar eclipse in Aquarius, and this is probably something in which it will really hit home. Again, it doesn't have to change your life completely upside down or dramatically. I mean, the sun will conjoin Uranus for another 7 years, but it gets you off to a start. It gets you off seeing things differently, or wanting to see things differently, or live differently from the way that you are living right now. And that is something that, again, may make you feel separate from the people that you know in your life. Friends and loved ones might be like, okay, you want to be a Broadway musical star at the age of 55. Okay, sounds fun, but do you think it's practical? I mean, you may leave people like wondering, but that will also test your resoluteness, your belief in yourself. And this is pretty much what the Sun-Uranus conjunction is about. It's more than just a flash in the pan. You get the flash of insight, but then it's up to you to struggle through the doubt and the anxiety so that you can find that again. And of course, once you find that, you will definitely be on the road to what you want to realize in your life. On June 9th, Venus will form a conjunction to Jupiter in the zodiac sign of Cancer. This is basically what we call the seal the deal conjunction, okay? And these two benefics, again, are conjoining in the element of water. They're conjoining in Cancer. Venus is no longer exalted, but Jupiter is, and so this is them coming together. Now, remember earlier I was talking about a Venus-Jupiter trine, and it's Cinderella at the top of the steps and everyone turning around and looking at her, and Jupiter, like the prince, like, she's the most beautiful creature in the world, I must marry her, And so there's that approach. Now the two planets come together. So maybe the person you started dating, now things are getting very serious between the two of you. Maybe the person that you reunited with, you now want to be a part of one another's lives. Maybe a merger and acquisition that was being worked on is formalized during this period of time. Cinderella has descended the steps and she's now waltzing with the prince, and they're singing 10 minutes ago, I met you. Okay, so which is a fabulous song, and I love that musical. So here they are, they've come together, and they are one. And this is what a conjunction is. Now, you don't dissolve into one being. You come together. You say, we're on the same page. That's what a conjunction is. So when a conjunction follows an approaching trine, what was introduced in the overture, what we saw at the first appearance, what we were hoping would be when we first set eyes on something, is now conjoined. It now comes together. So this is this is such a wonderful conjunction. It's great for romance. It's great for resuscitating a romance. It's great for coming together with someone else, either creatively and in business as well. It's where you seal the deal. And this is going to be a very big event and a very important one. And it basically makes June 9th one of the best days of 2026. On June 30th, Jupiter enters the zodiac sign of Leo. A new chapter begins when Jupiter, the planet of good fortune and higher purpose, enters the zodiac sign of Leo. Leo is ruled by the sun, the source of heat and light, And so for the next year, solar energy will kindle your sense of higher purpose so that you become the shaping force in your own life. It's not up to fate, nor is it up to circumstances to determine what you make of yourself. It's up to you. Indeed, you will feel a moral responsibility to realize your inner potential, whether it's a talent, gift, or calling. Jupiter in Leo is a galvanizing and a fulfilling transit for you as long as you don't settle for second best or allow yourself to be pigeonholed by other people's expectations. Jupiter will be resplendent in the zodiac sign of Leo until July 26th, 2027. On July 26, 2026, Saturn turns retrograde in the zodiac sign of Aries. Delays are to be expected when Saturn, the planet of time, turns retrograde. But things aren't dead in the water. Yes, you may have to wait until December 2026 to get that answer, resolution, or commitment you seek, but this is one of those few instances when time really does work in your favor, because what you propose flies in the face of an easy acceptance or rejection. You are probably going against the grain and challenging the way that things are typically done. Nevertheless, your prospects for success improve with each passing day. The rule of thumb with a Saturn retrograde: the longer the wait, the greater the payoff. And that's because delayed gratification is better than no gratification at all. On August 12th, 2026, we will have a solar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Leo. A solar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Leo pretty much asks one question and one question only. Who are you? Okay, now that might be something that we ask ourselves every day when we look in the mirror. Who are you? But it is this idea of who are you? And to try to answer that idea or to illustrate what I think this is going to be dealing with, I'm calling upon an essay that was written in the 19th century, which I found in, one of my sort of research binges. And regrettably, I did not print out or even write down the title or the author of this essay, but it has stayed with me ever since because it was so intriguing, the question that it asked. The case that it was making was that there is a difference between aspiration and ambition. What this essay said is that if you aspire towards something, if you are true to your aspirations, right? You're being true to your talents. You're being true to your abilities. You're being true to the gifts that the universe gave you. And so you aspire. Let's say you're really good at painting. Your aspiration would be to paint beautiful paintings. You have the talent, you have the ability, and so what you want to do is follow that aspiration wherever it may lead. Now, is it going to be enough to turn you into the new, Basquiat or something like that? Not necessarily, but it is going to work like a lantern in your life. It's going to lead you forward into your life if you're being true to your talents, your proclivities, your abilities, if you're being true to your skills, all right? Sometimes people can have tremendous talent, but that doesn't mean that they do anything with it. In fact, I've often seen people who don't really have a lot of talent, maybe just enough, but through skill and perseverance and even discipline, turn that into something that's beautiful. So what it is that there is, I see myself doing this. I love to paint. I get into the flow. This is something that really expresses who I am, and this is something that gives me pleasure and joy. And it might be something that you do in your backyard, like a watercolor or something like that. Or it might be something that you do that takes you halfway around the world, where you live with other peoples, or you study under great masters, or you work with techniques that are experimental and avant-garde. But what it's based on is something that comes naturally to you, that fills you with a sense of wonder and joy, something you want to know more about, something you really want to unpack, something you really want to develop. and there's an ease that comes through it. Now, that doesn't mean that it's always easy. I mean, you can struggle, you can have a painter block or a writer's block or something along those lines, but because it's always in alignment with that sense of you that's true to you, there's always going to be that guiding sense of like, okay, I'm going to get through this block, or maybe the block's leading me to something else. It's kind of like Picasso one day, like, I'm done with the blue period. I'm going to embrace cubism. I mean, I don't think he said it like that, but how it organically went from the blue period to the cubist period. He was following an aspiration. He was listening to his muse. He was following his art and his heart. So these are things that are connected to aspiration. I can do that. I want to do that. I can see myself doing that. And this aligns with my skills, talents, and abilities. In this essay, it then said ambition is not that. And boy, did that grab my attention. I was like, ambition isn't that. I mean, aren't we told in our society to be ambitious, to follow our passions, to follow our drive, to succeed? Aren't these things that are, really, kind of drilled into us, be ambitious, be driven, or that person was a failure because they weren't ambitious, and so I was kind of like, okay, well, what are you going to say about ambition, that isn't in conjunction with wanting to better yourself? And what this essay went on to talk about is that ambition usually shows up in people who have a feeling of want, okay, that they are bereft, that they are without something, all right? They may not have the talent, they may not have the ability or the skill, okay, but they want it, all right? But it's not that they want the ability, the talent, or the skill. They want what that ability, talent, or skill would bring. For instance, they want the success. They want to be the best. They want, as this essay pointed out, what other people have. And so they're ambitious for something which doesn't come naturally through who they are, or what the gifts are, or what the talents are, or their interests, or even proclivities. They may be ambitious because they want to win. They may be ambitious because they covet somebody else's success. They may be ambitious because they want to get to the top and dominate things. So, what this essay was saying is that ambition doesn't come out of a pure place. It doesn't come out of a recognition of what I can do, or what my talents are, or even where my interests lie. Aspiration is like, I'm so fascinated with this. I may never become a great painter or even a painter, but I love painting. So I'm going to go and study art and maybe even support painting with other people, and buy their works. Ambition is like, I have to have this. It's like a consuming energy. I have to have this painting because it's worth lots of money. They could care less what it looks like. They maybe keep it in a vault or something like that. I have to have this painting because it's worth lots of money. I have to have this position because I'm on top. I have to be the wealthiest person in the world or the most powerful person. And as we know from various fairy tales and myths and legends, and who repeat it endlessly, once you start down that road, where you are already bereft of the thing that you want, um, it's empty. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter how powerful you become. It doesn't matter how famous you are. There's a rapaciousness, a hunger that never goes away. And you just are ambitious. You're driven. You want the next thing. You want more, more, more. And the more that you get, of course, the hungrier you are, the emptier you are. We have so many movies that and fables that talk about this. And so this is something that may be pertinent to you during the solar eclipse on August 12th. Are you living in alignment and in truth to who you are, what you want, what your creativity is, where you see yourself going, you know? Or are you ambitious for something um, because it's not something you have now, but you want? Or it's going to give you the payoff. It's going to give you the meaning. It's you're going to fight to get this. Is it coming out of maybe an envy or a covetousness or a competition? So this who are you is kind of like, is this true to you? But it's not authentic self, like I'm being true to myself. It's like, this is my talent. This is my interest. This is my proclivity. This is my ability. This is really a small plant that I cultivate, that I want to bloom and to flower. Or am I following down something because I have to have it and my life depends on it? So these are the things that I want you to think about when there's a solar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Leo on August 12th. On August 27th, there will be a lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces, and that lunar eclipse will square the planet Uranus in the zodiac sign of Gemini. Now, I've already spoken a little bit about what lunar eclipses are about. They're reflective by nature, looking over your shoulder over the past 6 months to see where you've been and to see if things that had been begun 6 months ago are going anywhere, whether they have true life and vitality, or are they empty promises, things that are leading to dead ends. Things that are really hard to recognize or admit or to see in our lives, but are necessary to understand, because if we're on a road heading towards a dead end, you don't want to stay there. You want to be on a road that's going somewhere, that's promoting growth, vitality, and joy and love in your life. So, a lunar eclipse can also be the falling away of old things that are no longer pertinent. Maybe it's guilt trips that you're carrying around. Maybe it's obligations that don't have any merit to you anymore. Maybe it's a task that you have performed over and over and over again, and there's no value in it or reward in it right now. It's just tedious. So a lunar eclipse allows you to say, I'm getting rid of this task. I'm getting off this dead end. I mean, a lunar eclipse is kind of the moment where Sisyphus is like, you know what? I'm tired of pushing this damn boulder up this hill. I'm like, I'm going to sit down by the roadside and have a beer, So it's where it's like, I don't have to be doing this, and it can sometimes come through loss. And it can sometimes come through just fatigue or just, I've had it. So what we have here with this lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces, forming a square to Uranus and Gemini, is what I would call the "don't dream it, be it" lunar eclipse. Now, for those of you who recognize that line, "don't dream it, be it," then you probably also went to Rocky Horror when you were a kid. Okay, the movie you weren't supposed to see, that got together with your friends late at night and you went to the midnight showing of it at the local theater. At least that was my exposure to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, um, where you got up and did the time warp and you shouted at the screen and threw popcorn and celebrated people who came up dressed like Dr. Frankenfurter or Brad or Janet or one of the henchmen. So "Don't Dream It, Be It" comes from Rocky Horror Picture Show, the first interactive movie experience of my life, where you actually interacted with the film, and it was a lot of great fun. But it had a great message in it. Don't dream it, be it. And what this talks about and why it resonates to me so much with the Pisces, and because we're dealing with a lunar eclipse is an eclipsed full moon. So it's the time of month when the moon is opposite the sun. You're also dealing with the opposite sign, Virgo. So the eclipse is taking place in Pisces, but the only way that the moon can be full in Pisces is if it's opposite the sun in Virgo. So this is where you take both zodiac signs into account. So what's the dream part? Well, obviously that's going to be Pisces. Pisces, we all pretty much know, is the zodiac sign of dreams, of visions, of fantasy, And until recently, Pisces kind of had a really negative reputation because it was like, you're a daydreamer and you're never going to do anything with your life because all you do is dream about things, But now that we're living in a Pisces universe, which is basically what the internet is, where images and show up and we click on links and we're taken to other worlds and we see all these different images and experiences. We can put on goggles and have a virtual reality, or live in a video game for hours or days or weeks on end. Everyone's in the Pisces universe now. Everyone is dreaming, which is very pertinent and makes a lot of sense since Neptune is the modern ruler of Pisces and Neptune is the planet of the collective unconscious in astrology. The collective unconscious first articulated and described by Carl Jung, the idea of archetypes, symbols that are living and not static, and symbols that resonate and create a sense of meaning in someone's life and help us to decipher our own psyches. What Pisces has, which is this ability to imagine, to image. This is really what Pisces does. And again, everything is done through symbol. Symbolic language is important to a Pisces. What we don't always think of as being symbolic language is math, for instance. The idea of formulating theories and putting together numbers and doing math and physics. Well, Einstein was a Pisces, so it's that ability to imagine, to image, with the hieroglyphs of numbers, or maybe it's the hieroglyphs, the symbolic language of musical notes, and we all know that music is very important to Pisces, people who have their sun, moon, or Pisces rising, the ability to create, generate, perform music, whether it's poetry or a hit single. So Pisces at the end of the day is the ability to image, to imagine, but it's also a vision, okay? A vision of the way that things could be, a dream. I had a dream of the way that things could be. This isn't a lunar dream, a moon dream. Moon dreams are the dreams you have every night, that you wake up and like, what the hell was I dreaming? And maybe you write it down in your journal. But, a moon dream, a lunar dream is that dialogue, that conversation, that experience of the unconscious at night in a dream. Okay. But the dream of Neptune vis-a-vis Pisces is a dream of something better. And what I always love to use as an example is Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, okay, which he gives on the steps of the Washington Monument. And it's interesting how they describe how he gets into that. He had a speech prepared, which was very different talking points and things that you say. And he was speaking to a large crowd, and that was going to be it. But all of a sudden, he just like goes off. He's seized by this dream of something. He's seized by the spirit, and he begins to go off script. And I think it's Mahalia Jackson is like, tell him about the dream, Martin. She's right there next to him, like, echoing him and prompting him and encouraging him like a gospel singer, and he just goes into this rhapsody. He goes into this vision, and he delivers one of the great speeches of American history, the I Have a dream of what the world can and should be. And this is very Piscean, having this dream. But the problem is, how do you actualize it? And that's really the conversation, the dialogue between Pisces and Virgo. Virgo is an earth sign. It's ready to apply. Okay. Virgo is looking for how do we apply this to life? Okay. You can have a dream, but how are we going to apply this to life? How are we going to bring your dream about in easy to follow steps that everyone else can practice in their lives? Okay. So the opposition can either be like, I have a dream, and the Virgo energy can be like, and I have a critique of your dream and let me poke holes in it. Or it could be like, I have a dream, and the Virgo is like, I'm inspired by that dream, and how do we apply it? How do we make it our everyday life? How do we make your dream come true? All right. But what's being asked here with the lunar eclipse and what's kind of prevalent in that sort of Pisces manner is the idea of yearning for something, of longing for something. I yearn for this person. I long to be there, usually somewhere other than where I am right now. And so yearning and longing are things that are very much connected to Pisces. Pisces is always like, like, why do you sigh so poetically, Pisces? And it's like, so and so will never recognize me, or I see poetry, but I can't write it down. And the thing is, sometimes people will be like, okay, but what's really going on, and it's a very legitimate Piscean experience, is they see the poetry, but because poetry or the inspiration of Pisces belongs to the realm of water, all right, it's like you have to go into your unconscious to see it, to be it. But that's like diving into the ocean. You can dive in the ocean and you can snorkel with the fish, but you can't stay down there with the fish because you breathe air. You have to come back up. You're not going to live your whole life, down there with the fish. Um, at least not aided and abetted by a snorkel or an oxygen tank or something like that. So Pisces is very aware that what they see in their imagination isn't what is in their physical reality, and actually trying to bring what's in the imagination to the physical reality is extremely painful. We think that because we're inspired by a muse or something like that, that we'll just jot down what the muse says and there's my number one hit. Muses, like the unconscious, don't feel great allegiance to our waking world. Muses, like the unconscious, don't feel great allegiance to the surface world at all. They're more than happy to stay in the unconscious. They're more than happy to stay in the imagination. And so that can leave people with Sun and Pisces, Moon and Pisces, Pisces rising, yearning and longing for something, knowing that they can't have it because it lives in another country. Or rather, what I should say is it lives in another realm, which is the realm of the ocean. So when we have this phrase with the lunar eclipse, don't dream it, be it, with the square to Uranus and Gemini, a square brings a challenge. And the Uranus in Gemini is saying, listen, are you going to stay here languaging, yearning, wanting to be something? And maybe tonight at Castle Frankenfurter, you can cross dress and, have a fun old time. But, in the morning, you're going to go back to, your briefcase life, or are you going to take your experience of liberation and ecstasy and joy and celebration? And are you going to step into it? Are you going to say, this is the place I'm living out of? And of course, the way that Uranus and Gemini is going to bring that into your life is through a relationship. All right. Now, many of us can be looking for that soulmate, for that perfect person. And we meet lots of wannabes or people who just don't add up. They just don't, fit what we have in mind. And that cannot be a good thing, especially in nowadays where we have so much emphasis on virtual reality and photoshopping and imaging. We can end up just never connecting to another person at all, where we render a physical person into the realm of a figment of the imagination. They don't fit, they don't click, they're not what exactly we're looking for. There are lots of, we rarely find things exactly that we're looking for. A lot of things that we're given in life have the potential of something, and it's the journey of that discovery, of that unpacking, that potential that is the essence of creativity. If Michelangelo just stopped at looking at, a block of marble and said, oh, I can see the Pietà in this, but it's just a block of marble and I can't get past that. Well, we'd never have the Pietà. It's like, you have to like go at it. Okay, you're not going to just be handed like Michelangelo, here's your Pietà. It's like you have to work at it. You have to chisel, you have to create, you have to shape. And so that's what's going on here. So Uranus and Gemini will bring someone into your life. Maybe it's a relationship, a friend, a boss, a client. Um, and they're eager to connect to you, and you may find yourself, no, it's not the right person. But that crisis, which is brought about by the square, this could be someone who comes into your life who's totally not the right person at all, but it's right that they're in your life. Maybe they're here to dispel an illusion. Maybe they're here to fascinate you. Maybe they're here to harangue you, something. But they're moving you out of this chasm between imagination and they're moving you out. They're moving you to bridge the chasm of I have an image of something, but I don't know how to apply it. And they're moving you to find a way to apply it. And that might be giving up a cherished notion, a cherished dream that got in the way of your dream, a cherished path, a cherished situation or relationship. It might mean giving that up, could very well mean giving that up. But then what you're moving on to is something that's so much more profound and tangible. You can touch it at the end of the day. On August 31st, Jupiter forms a trine to Saturn. Jupiter, as I just said a couple of aspects ago, is now in the zodiac sign of Leo for August 31st, 2026. And Saturn resides in the zodiac sign of Aries. They're a trine because Leo is a fire sign, Aries is a fire sign, and these two planets are forming a bridge or connection to one another. They're simpatico because of the trine that exists between them. The two planets are understanding one another and they're going to work on the behalf of the other. This is interesting because it follows a pattern which is going on throughout 2026, where two planets that typically have an adversarial relationship or an antagonistic relationship are putting aside their differences and working together. Jupiter and Saturn have as much of an antagonistic relationship as Saturn and Uranus do. Where Saturn overthrew his father Uranus and castrated him, Jupiter overthrew his father Saturn and took over the heavens. Okay. Saturn led the Titans in a battle with Jupiter and the Olympians, and Jupiter with the Olympians won out. He set up house and home on Mount Olympus and set up a new world order. But he couldn't get rid of Saturn. You can't get rid of old gods. They don't die. So what do you do with them? And Jupiter kind of imprisoned Saturn for a while, but he kind of got bored with that and just sort of like let Saturn wander around on the planet Earth below. So Saturn was always around. He wasn't a threat to Jupiter. He wasn't going to overthrow Jupiter. But it was kind of like, well, what do you do with the old man? And that's kind of what this trine is about. It's the what do you do with the old man? Okay, I mentioned earlier how Saturn was seen as a malefic because its light wasn't as pure and bright as Venus and Jupiter's light was. It was faded and slow, and it was seen as infirm. It was seen as elderly. So it was kind of seen as like, well, what do I have to learn from that old tired planet slogging through the sky and taking forever to go from one zodiac sign to the other and will never leave. It's always going to be around. And so our ideas of age and the elderly and being at a point of life in which this person's just not useful anymore. What these are all connected to Saturn. Saturn is a planet that reflects our fears and anxieties. And of course, fears and anxieties as we get older is like, am I going to stop being useful? Am I going to not be able to take care of myself? And these are fears and anxieties that can show up with Saturn. But Saturn is dogged in its pursuit, in its travel through the heavens, and it won't give up. So this idea of like, well, what could I learn from this old person, this old coot, or something like that? Well, when Jupiter and Saturn form a trine like this, there's a lot to be learned. Now, first of all, this is what we call a departing trine. If you remember how I was talking about an approaching trine, Venus was in Pisces, which comes before Cancer. Basically, if you go Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, you can see how Pisces is earlier in the calendar year than Cancer is. It's at the end of winter, and Cancer is at the solstice, the beginning of summer. That's an approaching trine, and it's based on the faster moving planet. Venus moves faster than Jupiter does. But in the Jupiter-Saturn trine, Jupiter is moving faster than Saturn does. For instance, Jupiter will take 1 year to go through all 12 zodiac signs. Saturn will take 2 to 2.5 years. For instance, Jupiter will spend 1 year in a zodiac sign and basically will take 12 years to go around all 12 signs, whereas Saturn will spend anywhere from 2 to 2.5 years in one zodiac sign and will take anywhere from 28 to 30 years to go through all 12 zodiac signs. That's called a Saturn return. So Jupiter moves faster than Saturn. Jupiter is out ahead of Saturn. It's in Leo. Saturn is in Aries. Jupiter in Leo in the summer comes later in the calendar year than Aries does, which is the spring. So Jupiter is in a fire sign, it trines the Saturn, and it's in a departing trine. So what's basically a departing trine? It's saying goodbye, obviously, but basically, I think the best way to think of a departing trine is what's the takeaway? Okay, what's the takeaway from this experience? And so at first, what you may experience with this Jupiter Saturn trine, with Jupiter departing from its trine to Saturn, is that you may experience hanging out with someone or talking to someone who's older than you, that you might regard as kind of like being, older and maybe infirm, or what do they have to offer me? Maybe the person's just older than you by 7 years or something like that, but maybe they're washed up in some way. Maybe there was one time when they were the big, bright, brilliant thing, but they messed up or they failed or they screwed things up, and now they're by the wayside and they're not what they used to be. So this might be someone in your life. Maybe it's an older relative or a friend, or maybe it's an old colleague or someone you worked for or with. And this person comes back into your life, and you're kind of like hanging out with the person or talking to the person, kind of wondering like, like, what am I getting out of this? I mean, what could this person possibly have to offer me? Or maybe you've been put into, maybe you've been guilt tripped by your parent to go visit with, Aunt Betty or something like that. Um, and you're kind of like, what am I getting out of this? But this is a trine. And what you're getting out of it is a meeting with an older and a wiser voice. For instance, in Asia, they have this wonderful thing where they have young people, I think it's mostly young men, come in and visit older people in senior citizen homes to give one another company. Now, at first you would be like, well, why would a young fellow, up and coming visit with a senior citizen? But there are these bonds that have really developed where, the senior citizen is really sharing the wisdom or what they've gone through in life with the younger person. And the younger person who's feeling, and they're like guys in their 20s, maybe even 30s, where they're feeling kind of lost or they don't know what they're about, that they hang out with this person, they listen to the stories, they exchange their points of view, and they're talking to one another. So it's not like a charitable act or a community service. It's something in which there is respect and a relevance that comes. And so Saturn, who's always like the old guy, may be coming into your life as someone that you meet or someone you're related to, someone that you don't really think of as being relevant to you. And during this August 31st trine, you recognize the relevance. You recognize the meaning. You recognize, that maybe this person has words of wisdom, or maybe it's just the experience of being with this person, or maybe this person traveled down the same road that you did. It's not the exact same road, but they know what it's like to face the issues and dilemmas that you're facing. And so this is something that could actually give you a tremendous amount of support and validity and recognition and company. It could be a real education. And it's not just going to be like, an Obi-Wan Kenobi talk to me type of thing. It's going to be, this is going to be someone who's made mistakes. They've wiped out, they've had failures. And they're going to be like, learn from my mistakes, but not like, learn from my mistakes. This is what, no, it's like, I made this mistake, but a mistake doesn't kill you, or a failure isn't an end, or it led me to something different. I used to be part of the rat race and now I'm not. I'm not saying you have to leave the rat race, but guess what? Maybe you have a choice whether you want to be part of a rat race or not. So this is going to come through an older and a wiser person, someone you might have been like, I don't know why I would even be talking to this person. But within moments, you'll recognize exactly why you're talking to this person, and you will cherish and value the words and the meanings that they have to impart to you. On September 10th, 2026, Uranus turns retrograde in the zodiac sign of Gemini. Now, it's not every day when you reverse engines, but this might be one of those rare occasions when you do. The about face, brought about by Uranus's backwards motion, has less to do with beating a retreat and more to do with changing your approach. Maybe you're backtracking to discover the point where things got off track. Or maybe you're creating the impression of leaving the scene to throw rivals off the scent while you circle around and take them by surprise. In any case, this is a good time to take a page from the Gemini playbook, which is to always keep people guessing. On September 27th, Mars enters the zodiac sign of Leo. This is an interesting thing that's going on in the heavens that begins with Mars entering the zodiac sign of Leo on September 27th, because this is when Mars begins its translation of light. Now, translation of light is an old term that's used in astrology that talks about a very fast-moving planet moving the energy of a slower moving planet from one place to another in the heavens. Now, that can sound kind of abstract and like, okay, what exactly does that mean? The best illustration or example that I like to use for a translation of light is a relay race. Okay, if you're familiar with relay races, you have a team of runners who are staggered around the course. And the race begins with each of the competing teams carrying a baton, and they have to race up to the member of their own team and pass that baton to that person. And that person takes the baton and races to the next person, and they pass it there. And of course, the first team to cross the finish line wins the race. So this isn't a single thing. It's not like one runner competing against another runner. It's a team of runners that are competing against another team of runners, and they're passing a baton. I want you to think of that baton that's being passed as a translation of light. Kind of imagine for a moment that the baton is glowing with light, and that's what's being transferred from one runner to another as you go from start to finish. So what happens is that on October 2nd, remember that Mars enters Leo on September 27th. On October 2nd, Mars forms a departing trine to Neptune in Aries. As we know, the departing trine it's the takeaway. Okay, I've been there, and this is what I'm taking away from the experience. So Mars is in Leo, which is further into the zodiac than Aries. Aries is at the beginning of the zodiac, and Leo is the fifth sign in the zodiac. So Mars is trining Neptune, and this is very powerful because Neptune is in the zodiac sign of Aries, which is ruled by Mars. Okay, so the conduit is very powerful between here. So Mars is forming a departing trine from Neptune. So this is like Mars is being inspired, guided by a Neptunian vision of the way that things could be. So if you've ever had an experience where you're inspired by a concert you went to, or you're inspired by a book that you just finished reading, or you're inspired by a meeting you went to, or someone that you met, this is what's going on. The Neptunian energy is inspiring Mars. It's making Mars feel more confident, more virile, like it can really do something. Okay, so on October 2nd, Mars forms a departing trine to Neptune. On October 16th, Mars forms a departing trine to Saturn. So Mars has picked up the baton from Neptune. And it's picking up the baton from Saturn. So what goes with the inspiration is also the discipline of Saturn, the feeling of, if you're going to follow this course or this course of action, you have to commit to it. You have to be dedicated to it. You have to be disciplined. You might even have to make some sacrifices along the way. And Mars is like, okay, yeah, I'm game. I'll make those sacrifices. So Mars is feeling very inspired and very heroic and soldierly, and also very disciplined. So Mars is moving the lights, the energies of the Neptune and the Saturn and Aries, the zodiac sign that it rules, and it's taking it to Jupiter. Okay, and it's going to form a conjunction to Jupiter in Leo on November 16th. So you can almost think of this as, if you remember, there's Cinderella atop the stairs and she sees her prince and she comes down and they conjoin, they waltz. Okay, that's the drawing to the waltz. Here, it's the trine, departing trine that's leading to a conjunction. Whenever you have a conjunction at the end of a series of aspects like this is the culminating point. This is where it all comes together. And here, Mars being inspired by Neptune, being disciplined by Saturn, charged with the responsibility uh, from Saturn, comes and forms a conjunction to Jupiter, okay, in Leo. And so what this is that it's kind of like imagine a knight coming back from a knightly adventure. And and this knight hasn't been seen in years, and it comes back to King Arthur's court or something like that, and it says, "I returned with the Holy Grail," or something like that, something I adventured for, and now I'm bringing the Holy Grail back to you, and you genuflex before the king. That would be like the Mars Jupiter conjunction in Leo. So you may have been charged with something. You might have been given an assignment or a project or an enterprise that you've worked very hard and tirelessly on. And maybe you're bringing it to someone's approval. Maybe it's delivery. Maybe this is a deadline. Um, maybe you finished writing a book and now you're going to an agent in hopes that the agent will sign you. So this Mars Jupiter conjunction, you're on the same page. A conjunction is always the two planets are on the same page. And this is a triumphant conjunction. This is a good conjunction. It's the king is like, I've been wanting that Holy Grail for the longest time, or the agent is like, my goodness, this is the next great novel, so this is what the conjunction is. It's going to be a triumph, it's going to be a victory, it's going to be something that's very good, something that you will see and experience for yourself when Mars completes its translation of light and conjoins Jupiter in the zodiac sign of Leo on November 16th, 2026. On October 2nd, Venus turns retrograde in the zodiac sign of Scorpio. Now, this is a big deal. Venus, as we know, is named after the Roman goddess of love and beauty. She wants to bring peace and harmony and beauty to everything that she touches, but she has trouble doing that when she's in a Mars-ruled sign. This is called a detriment in planetary dignity. Any planet that's traveling through the sign that is opposite the sign that it rules is said to be in detriment. The Venus-ruled signs are Taurus and Libra, and so Venus is in detriment in Scorpio. It's a Mars-ruled sign opposite Taurus, and she's in detriment in Aries, which is a Mars-ruled sign opposite Libra. So the goddess of peace, love, beauty, and everyone gets along doesn't want to be in a Mars-ruled sign because Mars-ruled signs are all about conflict, difficulty, all this drama, which Venus is really not that interested in. She just wants to make love, not war, okay? And so when Venus finds herself in the zodiac sign of Scorpio, she may find herself out of her depth. All of a sudden, everything is life or death stay. So when Venus enters the zodiac sign of Scorpio, she may find herself out of her depth. All of a sudden, her choices are life or death choices. It's this or that with no ability to sort of finesse a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's you cannot have your cake and eat it too when you're traveling through a Mars-ruled sign. It's either the cake or doing without the cake. So Venus, who's always looking to have the cake and eat it too, is being forced to make some very difficult decisions, crucial decisions, when she's traveling through the zodiac sign of Scorpio. And when I say that you find yourself out of your depth, you may be in a relationship or an association with someone who's taking things much more seriously than you are, who's playing for keeps, or is very domineering or very possessive or something along those lines. Venus turning retrograde sort of rubs salt into the wound of being in detriment. Retrograde, which is a reverse direction, if Venus is about attracting all the things that she wants, when Venus is retrograde, she's attracting all the things she doesn't want, okay, which might be very possessive personalities or people who are very domineering, those sorts of things, and they're creating scenes and situations that might be making you as a person very uncomfortable. Maybe they're using money to manipulate your behavior or to make you do what they want you to do. So this retrograde in Scorpio begins on October 2nd. Venus then retrogrades back down to the Sun, so that on October 23rd, the Venus and the Sun come together at the same degree, and that's called a cazimi. And that could be where a situation that's been building becomes much more dire, becomes much more crucial, becomes much more like, I have to choose this or that, and so much is writing on it. And you may be feeling like you're being forced to make a decision that you don't want to make, or that if you make the wrong decision, it's going to be way wrong and it's going to cost you dearly. The beautiful thing about Venus re-entering the zodiac sign of Libra by retrograde on October 25th, which is 2 days after the cazimi, is that Venus is back in her own zodiac sign again. She's back in the zodiac sign of Libra. Scorpios have a tendency to really sort of narrow the vision and focus on just one thing, the thing that they want, the thing that they can't live without. Venus has a tendency to widen its vision to create two plates on a scale in which things are being balanced. So Libra is all about the options and the alternatives. It's all about the this or the that. And it's all about weighing things in the balance to come up with the right choice. And sometimes the right choice is making no choice at all. What this does with Libra re-entering Libra on October 25th is that it's going to introduce alternatives that you didn't feel like you had before. Maybe it's simply talking to a friend who's like saying, it's not black and white. There's a whole, polychromatic spectrum of choices that you can make. I mean, don't make that person feel like it's them or nothing. You have all sorts of different choices you can make. Or you may be meeting with people who are like, well, let's examine it from a place where that's more intellectual, where you don't feel so emotionally wrapped up or struggling with yourself. Let's relax, get some distance, look at it in terms of the bigger picture, and really go over the things that you want, because I don't hear what you want in this conversation. I hear what the other person wants or what the situation is demanding from you, but I'm not really hearing you. And you always have choice, especially at times when you feel like you don't have a choice. So these are things that you will be reminded of during this period of time and be strengthened by and encouraged by, so that when Venus comes out of retrograde in Libra, the zodiac sign that she rules, on November 13th, not only will you feel like you've got different choices and alternatives, but when she re-enters Scorpio again, you're going to feel like you've got things to keep in mind and choices to make, rather than feeling like those options have been taken away from you. You're going to feel very much like you're in possession of them, like you have cards in hand that you can play. And as you play these cards, you can follow the developments as they unfold while maintaining control of them. On October 15th, Pluto comes out of retrograde in the zodiac sign of Aquarius. A loose end, or a bit of unfinished business, has been hanging over your head for a very long time. Maybe it's a career you never pursued, a path you never took, or a diploma you never got. In any case, you're motivated to take care of it now. Pluto, coming out of retrograde, often revives past drives and ambitions. But just because they're back on the table doesn't mean that they're still relevant to who you are now. That can only be determined by going through the process, and seeing where things stand vis-a-vis yourself. Are you still into this career? Are you still interested in this path? Do you really want to get that diploma? And what's it going to do for you now? This process will last from this time that Pluto is coming out of retrograde, which is on October 15th. It will last until October 15th, until late January and February. So again, this isn't about the result or the target. It's about seeing what you really feel about what you want to pursue. And when you reach that feeling, when you say, oh, this is what I want to pursue, or how I want to pursue it, or maybe I don't want to pursue it at all, I'm making peace with saying goodbye to it. Whatever happens, whatever realization you come to in the late January, early February period, you will be made all the richer for it. On November 29th, Uranus in the zodiac sign of Gemini will form a trine to Pluto in the zodiac sign of Aquarius. These are two planets which have nothing to do with one another. And again, that is a theme that is repeating through 2026. Planets that have an adversarial relationship, or in this case, it's not really adversarial, but they don't really have much to do with each other, are brought into some kind of alignment. And it's not a confrontation. It's not a, you guys have to get along right now. It's actually an alignment. It's, I can see where having you in my life would be a good thing, or I could see where working with you would bring wonderful results. These are things that are the products of trines in astrology. So on November 29th, we see Uranus form a trine to Pluto. Now, why I say that these are two planets that don't really have a lot in common is because, remember, Uranus is named after the god of the heavens in astrology. He's named after the Greek god Uranus, which meant father heaven, father sky. And basically, Uranus or Uranus stood for all the stars in the heavenly night, which are countless and more than we could possibly begin to imagine. They're the stars we see, which lends us to imagine the stars that we don't see, and it goes on for infinity, it goes on for eternity, which is why the starry night of heaven has always been associated with eternity. Pluto's realm is the underworld. This is the place that's beneath the earth. Pluto was named after the Roman god of the dead, Pluto, who in turn was named after Hades, the Greek god of the dead, the Greek god of the underworld. And this is where our bodies are buried, but it's also where seeds are planted, and it's also where we mine great riches like gold and silver and precious metals and oil. Okay, so wealth and abundance is also associated to Pluto, which makes sense because we get our word plutocracy from Pluto, which means moneyed or wealthy class. So the idea of Uranus and Pluto coming together in a trine and just being very separate realms. I mean, imagine for an instant a mole digging its way out of the ground and looking up at the stars in the sky. Well, it doesn't see the stars in the sky. A mole knows digging and being in the underworld. That's its world. And so the majesty of the heavens is lost on the mole that might be sniffing and for a moment before it starts burrowing down into the ground again, which is stars would have nothing to really relate to with the underground world of a planet. I mean, so these are two realms. One is vast eternity, and the other one is vast in its mystery and in its secrets. So what happens is that the two form a trine on November 29th. So there's an understanding that's set up between these two planets, which symbolize two very, very different realms. Now, what I want you to do is sort of think back to the now, what I want you to do is to think back to the 20 teens, okay, or the 2010s, and particularly 2011 to 2016. It's during this period of time that Uranus and Pluto were also aspecting one another, but they were forming a square to one another. Okay, that means that they were combative, that they were challenging one another, that they were not getting along. You have Uranus, the planet of enlightenment, revolution and change, and seeing for miles and miles and miles and miles. It's abstractions and ideals. And then you have Pluto, which is the underworld planet that's associated to ordeals and the transformations that arise from them. So Uranus uplifts, it transcends, and Pluto puts you through an ordeal, and through the kiln of that ordeal, you are transformed into something better or something purer than you were before. Okay, so these are two different ideas, and these two ideas were in combat with one another through 2011 to 2016 when they squared 7 times, if you can imagine such a thing. 7 times these two came at one another. And if you remember 2011 to 2016, like I do, that was a time of great transformation and change, and one that we might still be recovering from. And that's kind of the idea here, one that we might still be recovering from. It planted the seeds to a lot of things that took place, beginning in 2016 that come to modern day, and things that have to be reconciled, things that need to be brought to peace, things that need amends to be made, maybe even reparations, all ideas that would be combined in the idea of a trine. So a trine is an attempt by the planets to mend that rift. The rift is the square, which took place between 2011 and 2016. It really comes to a climax in 2016. That's the final square. And so what this trine is attempting to do is to mend the rift. Actually, the trine ultimately will be successful in mending the rift. Whether we like the way that that rift is being mended or not is completely subjective and arbitrary, but according to the planets in the heavens, those rifts are going to be mended. And so this is a bridge time. This is a rebuilding time. This is a recovery, a restoration, a recuperation time where the differences that were so accentuated and so irreconcilable are now being seen as reconcilable. It's like when two countries have gone to war and they've really given as much as they've gotten, but decades later, they're allies and they're friends. An example that comes to mind immediately is the United States of America and Germany and Japan. In World War II, it's, absolute, enemies and adversaries. And now they're allies and trading partners. So that's kind of an example of how a trine can follow a square. And that's the idea that I really want to communicate to you to sort of ruminate on, to think about when Uranus forms its trine to Pluto on November 29th, 2026. On December 10th, Saturn comes out of retrograde in the zodiac sign of Aries. You might have found yourself stuck on the horns of a dilemma when Saturn turned retrograde in Aries in July 2026. There were no easy answers to your situation, and you've probably been struggling with a crisis of confidence, courage, and direction since. Yet struggles can prove enlightening given enough time. We live in a society that doesn't like time. It expects instant gratifications and chat GPT solutions to our predicaments. We don't trust slow, much less sorting things out for ourselves. These past 4.5 months would have taught you the value of retreating from the world to reconnect with your own spiritual center. Saturn, out of retrograde today, shows that you will emerge from this with the wisdom, self-sufficiency, and grit to steer your life by. On December 12th, Jupiter turns retrograde in the zodiac sign of Leo. Has your luck changed? That's what you'll be wondering when Jupiter turns retrograde in the zodiac sign of Leo. After weeks of good fortune, you'll find that things will now become a struggle. Now, if your reaction is to abandon the path you're on, then that might say you weren't really truly invested in your journey. However, if you're committed to following your life path, wherever it leads, then Jupiter will reward your unwavering faith when it comes out of retrograde on April 13th, 2027. Jupiter is all about connecting to your own unique higher purpose when it's traveling through the zodiac sign of Leo. On December 29th, 2026, the Sun in Capricorn will form a square to Saturn in Aries. This is a very intriguing aspect and a kind of fun one to end the year on. Now, some of you might be like, a Sun-Saturn square is a fun aspect to end the year on, Christopher? And I would say, yeah, give it a chance. What I'm looking at here is this. The Saturn-Sun square is pretty much what we would call the I can't go on, I'll go on planetary aspect. And the reason for this is this. Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn. What's fascinating here is that Capricorn is the zodiac sign of endings. It comes at the end of the calendar year, all right, which is the winter solstice, Capricorn, when we celebrate Christmas and also New Year's, all right? And so Capricorn is kind of the closer of the zodiac. It's what brings things in for a landing. It's what brings things in for an ending. Okay. It's like, I've done my time. I've hit my deadline. I've finished this project. I've completed this task. And now I'm done. Okay. So this is Capricorn. It's the triumph of finishing something and finishing something well. It's in conflict with Aries because Aries is the zodiac sign of the spring equinox. Capricorn is the zodiac sign of the winter solstice. Aries is the zodiac sign of the spring equinox. Aries is all about beginnings, not endings. This is why we say Aries is really great at beginnings. They're great at pursuing something that excites them, that enlivens them, that they're passionate about. But bringing it in for a landing is something that's altogether different. Aries isn't particularly good at that, just as Capricorn isn't really good at beginning something. Capricorn will hem or haw or delay or postpone or maybe get around to beginning something. It can't get things right. It can't get its head clear on how it wants to start something. Capricorns take forever to begin or to start something. Once they're up and going, they're up and going. And once it's time to bring it in for a landing, they will hit their deadline. But starting something, boy, Capricorn's slow out of the gate. All right, so here we've got the zodiac sign of endings forming a square. The sun is in Capricorn. Okay, the sun is in Capricorn, the zodiac sign of endings, forming a square to Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, in the zodiac sign of beginnings. So what's really going on here? What's going on here is pretty much what you would assume to be what's going on here. I mean, Capricorn, Sun in Capricorn wants to bring things in for a landing. It's ending 2026. It's saying, okay, we're done. That's it. On for the new year. We're done with this year. And the Saturn in Aries is saying, are you really? And the Sun in Capricorn is like, well, what do you mean? I've finished this. I've dotted the I's. I've crossed the T's. I'm done. And the Sun in Aries is like, really? Do you really think you're done? And Capricorn's like, well, what are you going on about? And the Saturn in Aries is like, well, can't you do something more? Couldn't you have tried harder? Couldn't you do a better version of what you're trying to pass in? And Capricorn is like, are you telling me that what I'm trying to pass in is not a great version? And the Saturn in Aries is like, I don't know. What do you think? Saturn is the planet of doubt, okay? And whenever it forms a square to the sun, regardless of the zodiac sign it's in, okay? This is just a general rule. It plants a seed of doubt. It's like, do you really love him? Is that the job you really want to do? Are you really happy in your life right now? Okay, Saturn's always planting those doubts where we might be like, yeah, maybe, I don't know. This is what Saturn does, and it gets a little chuckle out of it. But it also plants the doubt because Saturn doesn't want you to be too sure. Saturn doesn't want you to close the door on something in which you might have done better with that. Now, Aries, whenever I teach the zodiac sign of Aries in an astrology class, I always describe Aries as coach dad. Okay, it's one of the signs of the father, just like Capricorn. The father's going to be a big deal either through his presence or absence. But when I say coach dad for Aries, it's the dad that's like, hey, give me 25 push-ups. And you're like, 25 push-ups? And he's like, yeah, come on, you can do it, and you do your first day and you do like 3 push-ups and you're like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. He's like, come on, don't give up. And you do, third or fourth day and you do 6 push-ups and then you get to 10, or after a week, maybe you get to 15, and after a week and a half, 18, and after 2 weeks, maybe you do 25 and you're like, I did 25 push-ups, and you're flexing your muscles and feeling great. And Coach Dad turns around and says to you, great, now give me 50 more. Okay, so what Saturn in Aries is always doing, because Saturn is the planet of tests, trials, and tribulations, Saturn in Aries is always saying, that's great, you did that. Now I'm going to raise the bar because I think you can do more, because I think you can do better than the way that you're doing right now. And so this is kind of the conflict between the two. The Capricorn, the sun in Capricorn is like, but I did it. And it's great. And the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. I'm done. This is fine. And the Saturn in Aries is like, come on, you can do better. You can do more. I know you got it in you. Let's do 50. Come on. You got to 25. You said you couldn't get to 25. Now let's try 50. I bet you can do 50. And it's like, and so because it's challenged, it's a square, the Capricorn doesn't feel like it could walk away from it. It's like, okay, because it's competitive. It's been goaded. It's been provoked by this Saturn and Aries, and Aries is ruled by Mars. So there's a provocation to the sign, but also kind of a clapping on the back, and you can do it. I believe in you. And so this is what you might be feeling at the end of 2026, and why I say it's not a bad aspect to end the year on. It's actually a good one because you're going to feel like I'm done. I've done everything. I want to close this year out. I want to close this project, enterprise, decision out. I gave the best that I could give. And there's going to be a part of you or someone saying to you, an employer or a client or a friend or a loved one, saying to you, you know, I think you can do better. I'm not sure you gave it everything you had to give it. And so you might at first be insulted or defensive or angry or not talking to the person or something like that. But it's going to dawn on you, yeah, I could have done better. I think I want to give it another go. I think I could have pulled on more than I pulled on before. I think I'm capable of doing more than I thought I was capable of doing before. And it's a great way to end because it's about a beginning. The beginning is a bit of a test. You're being challenged and tested and what you think is a good job done, but it's about a beginning. It's the very thing that engages you and brings you into 2027. So 2026 isn't going to be one of those years where you're like, oh, I can't wait to get the other side of 2026. It's going to end with like, hey, I did a lot of things and I experienced a lot of things this year, but you know what? Going into 2027, I bet I can do better. And those are your outstanding planetary aspects for 2026.